So recently, Paul, we've been looking at more of our work around helping people understand the kind of business they need to support the lifestyle they want. And we refer to that as a capital focused business, looking at a capital event for value creation, and a lifestyle focused business, which is maybe more about extracting profit over a period of time. We spoke about strategic orbit recently, and I know that that is the starting point really to whichever one of these destinations you wanted to end up at. But I wanted today, if we could, talk a little bit more about the next item in our lifestyle focused program, which is financial year budget. So I suppose really the first question is, how would you describe a budget to a client?
I would describe it as breaking down your financial year before it's happened. So you get to the end of the financial year, you look back and you understand what that year looked like in its entirety. So what profit did we make? What revenue did we do? All of your KPIs that fall off the back of that, net profit margin, gross profit margin, all of your financial and non-financial indicators. It's basically doing that before it happens. So you are setting your benchmark or your barometer of success ahead of the financial year. When we sit down in 13, 14 months time, what do we want to say has happened this year from a P&L perspective? So what the financial year budget is doing is laying that out in advance on a 12-month basis. So the 12 months of our financial year, what does that P&L look like month by month and in total? And you shouldn't be setting that to be anything other than something that would make you happy at the end of the year, something that would drive you throughout the year. So it's that balance of ambitious enough to keep you energized and something to get your teeth into, but realistic enough for you to achieve and celebrate at the end of the year as well.
Okay, so that's looking forward as to something you wish to achieve. So am I right in saying that's essentially a target? And if that's the case, what's the difference between that then and a forecast?
It is a target, and I think it's the most important target in your business or the most important KPIs. People often get themselves caught up in knots about, am I comparing to last year? Am I comparing to last month? Am I comparing to industry average or industry threshold? For me, the budget makes you do the hard work to decide what your benchmark is. So this might sound crazy, but for some businesses, next year might be a budgeting to do less than the last year. And the reason that might be the case is because you've finished the year in a difficult situation. So you might have just had a good year overall, but you've lost a massive client towards the end,
Yeah.
or the economy is massively turned against you. So a realistic target for next year might be to only do 10% less than last year or only do 20% less than last year. There's no point in saying in month 12, we're going to grow double digit growth versus what we did last year, or even grow at all versus last year, if the business is in decline or something has come as a surprise and hit you. Equally, just improving on last year, when you've finished the year really strong, market conditions are in your favour, clients are spending like crazy, just saying a 1% improvement might not be enough. So this is why I talk about doing the hard work, like sitting down and actually thinking about what have we got in front of us, what are the opportunities, what are the risks, and having a realistic plan. You can't just sit there and say, just improve or just do 10% because that's what we've always done. It's sitting there and going through all the revenue, all the costs. And I love it because it's a proper planning tool. You can't miss any area of the business when you go through the budget. Because when you're talking about revenue, you're talking about new business, you're talking about existing clients and their habits, you're talking about the macro environment and the market conditions. When you're talking about costs, you're talking about your team. Are they happy? Do we need to make pay rises? Do we need a bonus scheme? Do we need to hire more people? Is anybody underperforming? Are we getting what we want from our marketing? Do we need all this software? The list just goes on. You uncover every area of the business. So that's the answer to your first question. Second question, the forecast starting point should be your budget. So we're under no illusions, right? Nobody ever hits their budget, as in to the pound, revenue, profit, and all the numbers that make up the budget. That is not going to happen. 5 minutes after you sign off on that budget, something will change. A client signed that you didn't expect to sign, a client left that you didn't expect to leave, an employee left that you didn't expect to leave, a cost spiraled out of control that you could never have predicted, or you just made a mistake in your budget, because there's a lot to think about. Obviously, the bigger and more complex your business is, it's never going to be perfect. So the forecast says that rather than press the reset button, we'll take the work that we've done on the budget and we'll produce a projection based on what we know today. So you then edit that budget and say, okay, since then we know this person's left or this client signed or this cost has changed. So you have a live forecast which fundamentally de-risks achievement of the budget, because you're not put your budget together, stick it away in a drawer and then pull it out in 12 months to see how we got on. You're saying, okay, I don't want there to be any surprises. I want to de-risk that by saying, what are we currently forecasting against that budget, and update that on a daily basis.
So what you're saying is understand where you are as a business, understand potentially what's ahead of you. That could be the market, it could be internal facts, could be anything, and set a realistic goal. But then what you're saying is the forecast is the reality of. So I can sit down with my sat nav, I can say, take me to Paul's house in Congleton, and I can get on the M6, and then it'll say, problem at Sandbach, do you wish to go a different route? Forecast is the reality, maybe? Is that the best phrase? And the budget is your aspiration.
I think when people talk about tracking against a budget, they assume you mean historical, the month that's just passed. But you could look at tracking reality for the rest of this month and next month. You should already have a decent gauge, and depending on the type of agency, how much of their revenue is retainer versus how much is project will drive how predictable it is. But you should have a decent awareness of what the current and upcoming months look like. So the forecast is reality. We've set a benchmark or a budget or a target of X. Currently, we are projecting, forecasting Y. Now, what you can do with that gap is to say either fantastic, we're forecasting ahead. Now we can start looking 3 or 4 months ahead and closing the gap whenever it does exist. Or if we're behind, how are we going to now undertake activity that's going to start to close that gap? So the problem with only tracking historical is you can't do anything about it, can you? You close the month, you've either underachieved or overachieved. But the beauty of a forecast is it's not happened yet. So you can still take action to try and close that gap.
So I suppose that comes back to the other question that we hear a lot, which is, if my budget is going to be redundant 2 minutes after I sign it off, and let's just say I'm in a project-based business, so it is harder for me to look at forward work, why do I need a budget then? Why do I not just keep looking at forecasts and looking at what I'm doing going forward? What value does a budget give me if I think it's going to be not worth the paper it's written on?
As you said before, the word targets, the budget is your current target. So it's not that it's redundant 5 minutes after you've signed it off. It's that the here and now, 5 minutes after you signed off, might be different from the budget. So let's say, for example, in that budget, the next 3 months, we said we want 250 grand revenue. We are currently forecasting 160. It doesn't mean that the budget's dead. It means that we've got some work to do to try to close that gap. And the further out you can be achieving that gap, if that makes sense, and forecasting, the better, but that's not always possible. But typically what we would say is, ideally, multiple members of your team are in it every day. Map use this, and we'll have every team member will be in it in a calendar month, and most team members will be in it on a daily basis, because they are updating based on what they know today, based on what the clients are doing, prospects are doing, and the cost base is doing. So the finance forecast is daily.
You've raised it there, Paul, that maybe I've not thought about before, but maybe that's also a differentiation between the budget and the forecast. So maybe the budget, if we go back to this concept of the lifestyle business and the lifestyle focused, the budget is there to say, if I wish to extract X value from this business over the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the plan may be, this is the revenue and profit I need to achieve, is what you're saying there. And so that the budget in that instance could even be potentially just known by the owner of the business or the shareholders. And what you're saying there is also the purpose of the forecast is to be the daily or the weekly, whatever the cadence is, the input from those people. What are our billings? Where are we with these projects? And then for someone to sit back as the lifestyle focused owner to say, okay, how is our performance and our forecast against my budget? So in that instance, more my plan, my value plan. Would that be a fair way of putting it across?
Really good way of putting it. Yeah, the budget is set by the person that benefits most, I guess, from the performance of that budget. So it needs to be realistic enough for the team to have a cat and hell's chance of achieving it. But fundamentally, it has to achieve the ambitions of the business owner. And as you said in the strategic orbit session, no strategic orbit is written in stone, no budget is written in stone, but it's also not a live interactive document like a forecast is. So in the budget world, we would often talk about quarterly updates to the budget or considerations of updates to the budget. So 1 quarter in, you say, okay, do we still think this budget is fit for purpose? If we're way off track, do we need to change it? And that could be both ways. If we're absolutely smashing it and bombing ahead, do we want to set our bar a bit higher for these next 9 months rather than just sit back? If we're way behind, do we need to set something, with gritted teeth that's more realistic? Because we need to keep our team motivated and we need to face realism. So we talk about a 3+9, 6+6, and 9+3. And the first part of before the plus is the actuals, and then the next part is the updated target or barometer for the rest of the financial year. So it can change the budget, but it's not ever moving like the forecast is.
I think you've also said something there that's important, or I would suspect is important for the lifestyle focused owner, which is, okay, I'm doing this. I wish to extract this amount of value. Let's look at a sensible plan. I wish to earn X amount. I wish to earn, let's just say, a dividend plan. And then I wish to annually put X amount into my pension. That's my value creation. So I can understand then why that business owner may be cautious about sharing that information because it's perceived as private, it's perceived as their plan. Whereas the forecast, maybe as you said, there is the team tool. So the owner can say, right, I don't want to appear ungrateful for this team's performance because it means this year I might put a little bit less in my pension than last year. Or I don't want to be greedy because I can suddenly put more. I can max my pension out, but it's using the forecast to keep the team on the motivated track potentially, and the budget as part of that. This is my 3, 5, 10-year plan for my own value creation.
Yeah, so the team only need to understand the elements of the budget that are relevant to them and you are willing to share. So for some team members, that might just be revenue. And for some team members, it might just be an aspect of revenue. They're only in charge of department A, revenue stream A, or new business versus existing clients, whatever it might be. For others, it might be the full operating profit, operating P&L. So they are responsible for the overheads, the cost of sales aspect of the P&L. But in most cases, you are not then sharing what that profit's going to be used for in terms of how it funds the lifestyle of the business owner, because that is irrelevant, unuseful, private, confidential, all of those things. So it's those two things. It's what's relevant to them and what are you willing to share as a business owner.
But I think that's important for us to be able to explain and for the business owner to understand, isn't it? Very often, I have seen owners, grimace slightly if we sit with a budget and they think this is, a document that is being produced and it has lots of that information on, and the classic would be dividends, where actually what we're saying there is, but that's for you to keep and that's your barometer, and we can help you create suitable KPIs. We often have in our standard page 3 in the management accounts pack, there'll be values on there that you might say, let's have a truncated version of that you share around, which is just the revenue against target, etc., etc. So I think it's important for people to listening to understand that this is why it matters, but it's also how you use it that matters. And it's not a question of this is just one document that you either share or you don't share. It's how you decide to share the information around. But at the same time, my argument would be, you are a lifestyle focused business owner, then surely this is just how you keep yourself on track to make sure, to go back to the whole point of it, that your business is giving you the lifestyle that you want.
Yeah. And we're having that more and more with clients now, where we'll be having slightly separate reporting, maybe even separate meetings where they want us to present to the leadership team that they've put into place, or just members of the team, that are responsible for achieving some of those numbers, and let them have a forum away from the business owners to talk about trading performance in a way that's different to how the business owners would look at it.
So, just you mentioned their trading performance, and we all know that every business, but very often it is, particularly if they're going to be project-based agencies, the revenue can be, we can be feast and famine, etc. And that's why I see lots of people sort of reject budgets because they say, I can't see that far out in the future. Very often we'll hear people say, particularly in a project-based business, I find the idea of looking forward, it's not forecasting, I'm just stargazing. So I think what you're saying is you don't rip the budget up, you just freeze the budget. The budget is your original your original map. And then everything else that comes in is just you seeing how far you are off that course, basically. And do you need to redirect the plane back on the original flight path?
The budget is a must for me. So we talk about budget first from an unpredictability perspective before we talk about the forecast for, as you've said, that feast and famine, peaks and trough project type of business that you've talked about. Regardless of how unpredictable any of that is, you must have a measure of what would make you happy come the end of the financial year and what wouldn't. Like, you don't want to lose money. How much money do you want to make? Like I said before, is it progress on last year? Is it enough to pay for all of the things that you want and need for your lifestyle? Like, there has to be a level of where you're going to be satisfied. So regardless how predictable or unpredictable, what's the minimum you want to achieve for this business in this year? And to do that, you need to put a budget together. Then from a forecast perspective, yes, some businesses are less predictable and it's more tricky. I think it's really important to say that I think when some people think of the word forecast or maybe particularly projections, they think it's a scientific thing. So a conversation that I had with an agency owner recently was they were saying, well, how would I forecast that? Because you can't just look at the last 3 months or what's happened so far, because I know all this information that I put down on this spreadsheet that is based on conversations that I've had with the prospects clients and what I think should come off. So I'm not sure forecasting will work. I said, that is forecasting.
Yeah,
You are
exactly.
forecasting really well.
Yeah,
Like, forecasting is
forecasting
based
in
on,
reality. Yeah.
yeah, based on the judgment of all the people involved in this business and potentially a bit of science and, looking back at the data and what it tells you. If we were to put our best judgment on what we think is about to happen, no one's got a crystal ball, but what would that look like? Because that's then what drives action.
I think another way of using a budget is doing that quarterly review to say, okay, as you say, forecasting can be, okay, as the lifestyle focused owner, I wish to attain a certain value at the end of the year. So whatever the happiness drivers are, what we'll be happy with in 12 months' time, is to sit there maybe and say, okay, if for me to reach my level of satisfaction, I need this level of revenue in the next 3 months. That then is the conversation with what does our pipeline look like? Where are we going? Am I still on track to where I want to be? What do I do with this? I want to ask a question on. I think there's maybe a confusion or a misconception, and maybe we're to blame for this. Very often, when anybody from financial perspective puts a budget together, there are two sides to that budget. There's a revenue line and there's a cost line. And very often I see lots of owners in this space sort of be less confident about the concept of a budget because they see it as that sales forecast. They see it as revenue down. Now, I know you have an interesting reverse model, particularly for a lifestyle owner, that would say, okay, let me do it from the bottom up. If I wish to max my pension contributions, I need this amount of free cash at the end of the year. What does that look like? So if I have these members of my team in and we build the cost up, what sales do I need to make to hit that number? So that's not asking them to predict their sales. Talk through that a little bit, upside down or cost up. How would you describe that way of looking at a budget?
Yeah, so I believe that a budget should be both bottom up and top down. So the bottom up aspect, I often talk about it as an upside down P&L. So as a owner operator of a limited company, which most of our clients are, and by that I mean that they own the majority of the shares in the company and they are a director providing a role to that company, as in they're not a silent investor or they're not only a director and not invested. So you wear two hats, you're a shareholder and you're a director. As a shareholder, you should be expecting a significant return for the risk of running a small limited company. So what does that number look like? So whatever that number is, however you arrive at it, I want to achieve this as my shareholder hat. Separately, I also work pretty hard for this company and I deliver a role to it as its managing director, sales director, operation director, CEO, whatever it might be. A commensurate salary, if I was to hire somebody else to do the role that I'm doing, would be X. So if you put those two things together, that's what you would expect your reward to be. Now, that's not to get confused between dividends and salary, because one of the beauties of a owner operator is that you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you receive that level of reward return that we've just talked about. It could be a mix of salary, dividends, pension, and other benefits. So put that aside, you've arrived at a number. So that's the total number. Now, on top of that, you should want to retain some profits in the business. You shouldn't be sucking the business dry of all of its cash every year. So you need an extra amount as a buffer, working capital, safety net in the business. So now you add those three things together, and that's basically now the profits that you expect after tax for the company to deliver. Okay. Now you work your way up and say, what does it cost to run this business? Okay, it costs this to run, but in reality, we need to spend a bit more because there's the areas that are falling down, or we need to strengthen, we need to invest more in these areas. So you add that on as well, and then finally you get to your revenue number. So now, instead of saying we turned over 1 million last year, let's increase it by 10%, you get an absolute number. And it's really enlightening for a lot of clients when they do this. Most of the time it's, oh, right, we're not as far away from my dream business. I thought I needed to build a £5 million company making 20% profit to give me everything that I need. But actually, at 2.3 million, it gives me all I could ever want and a little bit more. And then we say, well, let's do another exercise. What's an average client spend, for example? Okay, now we can work out how many clients you need. Wow, I only need 42 clients. I've got 37 now. And then you could work out also how many staff they need and what staff they need and all of that. So that's the exercise of the bottom up approach.
I think you've hit another thing there, Paul, which is the bottom up approach is also if we accept that it's harder, it's not impossible, but it's harder to predict future sales, it's easier to predict your cost, isn't it? It's easier to know this is the team I've got, if this is the team I'm sticking with, or potential replacement costs. But it does allow you then to know what your fixed costs are. And you mentioned cost of sales there. And for anyone that's not sure what we mean by that, very often in this space, that's freelancers. So freelancers and extra resource that you're using to deliver something. So the budget, I suppose, and I'm going back to one of my first agency budgets, was exactly that. It was let's be clear on the cost that we've got. So what are our, I call them establishment costs, operating costs. So our people, our place, what's the facilities costs and also utilities, all the rest of it. And then we did a thing that said, okay, let's look at accepting that there's probably going to be the need for freelancers. The fact that we don't know what those projects may be this year, we just used a flat 10% of revenue in as freelance costs. And then that allowed us to look at it and say, okay, if with this is the direction we're going in, this is the sales growth that we need. If we talk about the differences between maybe lifestyle and capital, is it fair to say that a lifestyle business maybe doesn't need to budget for the growth that you'd expect to see in a capital focused? Is it okay to show a flat budget year after year after year?
Going back to what we were saying in the last one, the ultimate difference is the lifestyle business only needs to please you. As a lifestyle business, you would look at that P&L and say, I'm going to have to work too hard to achieve that. So I thought I wanted 200 grand a year, but actually I'd rather take 150, thanks, because that means I only need to grow revenue by X instead of exponentially higher. And that's all I'm willing to do because of the role that I want to play in this business and the role that I want the business to play in my life. So that's the fundamental difference.
I think that's a really interesting point to make, Paul. So that comes back to the thing that says, so as a lifestyle focused business owner, it's about my satisfaction, it's about pleasing me. But I suppose in that instance, I would then argue that what's a just enough budget. And I suppose very often the risk is people lose faith in budgets when they're trying to be maybe too aggressive, too growth orientated. But really, I suppose for the lifestyle owner, it's about what's just enough. If this is what good enough looks like, let's worry about good enough, because good enough is it's not your break even because it's the amount of profit, but it's your mental break even point. If you do more than that, brilliant. But I suppose a different way of looking at it is that thing to say, can you do just a good enough budget?
Yeah. And the other crucial thing about lifestyle, Stuart, is it depends where you are on your life journey as well. So you might have a more modest budget, more modest ambitions during the years where your children are young. You are finishing early to take them to activities. You want to be able to fully switch off at weekends. That might change when they get 18 and they move out and you're bored and you want to put your foot back on the gas again. So there are lots of nuances. And this is why, for me, it's criminal to try and compare one business versus another, because the age and profile and hobbies and interests and ambitions of the business owners are always going to be different. And that's why I talk about doing the hard work, not just using agency benchmarks, but to actually sit down and think about what's important. I said before about it's bottom up and it's top down. So the top down approach would be to say, okay, we've done that exercise and that's kicking out a revenue number of X that then might scare you, it might frighten you. So then you might need to feed that back down and say, okay, we thought I wanted to achieve a return when I was just looking purely at monetary terms of 200,000. I might need to revise that down for a couple of years. Or we thought we wanted to make all these investments within the business. I might need to scale some of that back because I'm not willing to do what it takes to hit that revenue number, which is again why then you come up, you're almost crossing your fingers when you're putting all these pieces together of the budget to all your cost base to say, what revenue do I need? And then it shows you, well, that doesn't seem too hard, or that's unrealistic. We need to pull some of the drivers here somewhere.
Interesting. Okay. So if somebody said, okay, I hear what you're saying and I understand why budget matters, and then maybe isn't prepared to do the phrase you used, the hard work. If somebody said, okay, Paul, help me create my lifestyle budget for the next 3 years.
So obviously we've done this a lot of times. We've got a lot of repetitions under our belt. And one of the things that we've landed on is we always want to make the business owner's life easier. We don't want to be making them do lots of work that we could take off their plate. So, for example, now we would go into the accounting system, look at the transactions and start to document the known things. You know, you always pay for this subscription every month. We don't need you to go and do the work to tell us that. We can see that for you. So usually we know all the employment costs in detail because we run the payroll. We know what everyone's costing you now, which includes all the add-on costs of those people in terms of tax, national insurance, pensions, training, welfare, whatever it might be. So we're going to list the as-is situation. We're going to present that back to you for you to then pick holes in it. And picking holes would not be how accurate it's been historically, because we know it's accurate, but it would be, yeah, we've made a decision to cancel that subscription from next financial year, so you can take that out of the budget. Or that employee is no longer going to be with us, or that employee's getting a pay rise, that employee's going on maternity, moving part-time. So anything that is in their head or in their business that we can't see from the transactions, that's what they would tell us about. So we try to do as much heavy lifting as we can. We can't set targets for them because that is just going back to the scientific, okay, if we just grow by 10%, if we just grow by 20%, it means nothing. We talk about partnering with our clients, which is a cliche, but we mean it. It's really important for the morale of our team and for the success of the client's business and the happiness of the business owners that we work in tandem. I always say we will never know our client's business as well as they do. Most of the time, most business owners are eat, sleep, drink and dream about their business. They founded it. They know it inside out. They know the market. We know the market to a degree, but their business is unique to them. So it's taking the time to understand what success looks like for them. We can't make that decision for them.
Interesting. You've said something there which also, if you think of it from our side, from the supply side, from the outsourced finance function side, is I've never asked this question, but I'd imagine that, you know, it's also more fulfilling for the client accountant or finance part that if they can see the budget, they see it in a format they understand, they may be more numeric, they may be more qualified than the client, but they're looking at something and they can see the progression on that journey. And ultimately, they know that they're then going to have that better conversation, that they can see the good news building, or they can see the storms ahead and say, well, actually, Stuart, you might need to look at this. So I suppose it's a tool that works both ways, doesn't it? It's there to help the business owner understand the journey they need to go on, but it also would mean that in terms of proactive support from a supplier like MAP, it means that we can also understand the direction of travel and that flight path, to use that phrase, and help them bring it back on course when needed.
Yeah, I see a lot of people with one-dimensional thinking. So they'll say things like, no problem growing next year or hitting our targets next year because we've got loads of interest from clients. Our service is fantastic. Our pipeline's really healthy. Brilliant. That's only one part of the story. Businesses are not one-dimensional, they're multi-dimensional. So yes, we can see that. We can see that this business is growing and that is fantastic. But your staff costs are growing at a higher rate. Your advertising is growing at a higher rate. The changes to national insurance rate means you're already spending an extra 25 grand next year with under no control of yours because the government has put an extra levy on your employer's national insurance. So I keep saying it, but we need to do the hard work to map it all out to tell the full picture. And sometimes it can be the other way around. The business owner is catastrophizing. Or no way I'm going to achieve these numbers again next year. We've just lost a really big client, and but you've just won 3 others that exceed that value, or you downsized the team this year, so you could afford to lose that big client and still hit the same numbers next year. So part of our skill is not playing down what the client's telling us to resonate with the pain that must be causing, the stress that must be causing them, but then use the numbers to tell the story, the overall story about what that means and what's really happening in the business.
I think you've also said something there that makes me think about where we are at the moment. We speak to lots of clients and we've done pieces obviously in the map room recently about trying to understand where you are on that journey, and people have had a difficult few years and COVID's come along. And I've spoken to people myself who suddenly have lost faith in what we would call essential financial tools. So lost faith in budgets because guess what? Everyone's budget was ripped up through COVID. But I also like to say, but it's a chance to just, control, alt, delete and reset, isn't it? Yeah. So if you now start again, or if you didn't do a budget before, even more important to understand why you should do one now, because the reality of your business may have changed. You may have downsized. Look, you and I are doing this remotely from our home offices. More and more people are doing that. So do you need to look at that? And you can actually, particularly for the lifestyle business, I would argue that lots of people out there could probably have a lower cost business and gain more from that business than probably they ever could, but they're not then using these kind of tools to help them understand that and set themselves on the right targets and the right path.
Your budget can be ripped up. Your budget is just your current intent as of today, and that can change at any moment, and it's there to be challenged and there to be changed. Obviously, don't recommend doing it every day because then it moves its purpose, but just picking up on something that you said there, we're an accountancy firm. We do numbers, figures for a living. But me and Amanda still sit down every single week and look at our numbers, and we always find cost savings all the time. We challenge everything. And it could be that there's a software subscription, but you're paying for features that you don't need. You're paying for users that you don't need. You're paying monthly when you could pay annually and get a reduction. So we just encourage people to be really open-minded and, again, do the hard work, go through line by line and don't take anything as a given.
I think you just also said something there, Paul, which is fascinating, which is it's almost that self-challenge, isn't it? We're all guilty of going along with the flow at times. As you say, sometimes either we feel worse than we did a few months ago, we feel better than we did a few months ago, and we allow that emotion to cloud our judgment. And I suppose the other benefit of the budget is to say, that's fine, but this was what you thought 3 months ago, 6 months ago. So what's changed? And if it's going great, were you conservative? If it's going backwards, okay, what made you think that at the time? Because I think we're all guilty of remembering what we want to remember that we agreed 6, 12 months ago, whereas I suppose this is a way of just committing that thinking to a one-page P&L that we can bring it back to every time. Interesting thoughts. I think if you want to reach out and understand either if you do have a budget, could you be doing more with your budget? Speak to your contact at MAP. And if you don't have a budget, then by all means, either reach out to Paul or reach out to anyone else on the team, and to understand what a budget could do for your business. So I suppose before we finish, Paul, I want to ask another question, which is, you just said something there, which is the obvious, which is MAP are an accounting business. And therefore, we're full of finance professionals who look at numbers every day for a living. But there's other things that a budget is there for. So is a budget just a financial and numerical exercise?
No, the budget itself for me is a translation of the business. It's translating the business in numbers in numerical terms. And as I said earlier, you lift every rock in the business to understand what's going on beneath it. But the budgeting process is much wider than just the story of the business, because it's about understanding the mental strain of the business owner, their lifestyle wants and needs as well, and playing those tunes to come up with that compromise as to what kind of business they want. We'll have conversations with clients where they've said, this year's been really tough. And we go, it looks really positive. Like you've done really, really well. And they'll explain to us that from a numerical perspective, it might have been really good, but the effort that they had to put in wasn't worth it. They would much rather have had the prior year where they didn't quite get the same returns, but they had more energy in the tank, more fulfillment, more free time, less stress, etc. So what fascinates me is that connection, if you like, between the financial data and the mental load, enjoyment, fulfillment of the business owner. And both of those stories are really important, because if they're feeling low, you can pick them up by saying, "But look, what a great year you've had." If they're feeling too high and too excitable, you're saying, actually, the numbers are not great and this is not sustainable how you're running the business, then that helps them as well.
So again, this comes back to a conversation you and I had 3 years ago, which is the battle of emotion versus logic when you're making decisions. What you're saying here, the budget helps you bring logic in, helps bring reality in, against where you're feeling. As I say, it's never as bad sometimes as we think, and it's never as good as sometimes that we think. Okay, well, thanks again, Paul, and we will talk again soon, and hopefully it's been of use to people.
Thanks.